Chapter 3, Melissa. Now that he had a plan, Xiao immediately felt much better. All of his fear and unease were swept away. Only then did he have the mental wherewithal to examine the fragments of Klein's memory in detail. As he ruminated, Xiao stood up out of habit and closed the valve on the pipe. He watched the wall lamp gradually dim until its flames extinguished before sitting back down. As he absent-mindedly fiddled with the revolver's brass cylinder, he pressed a hand to the side of his head, slowly flipping through his memories in the crimson-dyed darkness as though he were the most attentive viewer in a movie theater. Perhaps as a result of a bullet passing through his head, Klein's memories were like countless shards of shattered glass. Not only were the memories disconnected, but many spots were clearly missing. For example, where had the exquisitely crafted revolver come from? Did he commit suicide, or was he killed? What was the meaning of the words in the notebook, "Everyone will die, including me"? And did he engage in any strange business in the days leading up to the incident? Not only were these particular memories fragmented and incomplete, but the knowledge he should have had was similarly affected. Xiao believed that if Klein were to return to university in his current state, he was unlikely to graduate. This was despite him having left school only days ago without relaxing one bit. A job interview for Tingen University's history department in 2 days? The universities in Lone Kingdom do not customarily hand out offers to their graduating students automatically. My mentor wrote me a recommendation letter for Tingen University and Backland University. As he silently flipped through the reels of his memory, the crimson moon outside the window descended slowly in the western sky. A faint light glowed from the east, dyeing the horizon golden. Just then, he heard shuffling sounds coming from the adjoining room. Soon, the sound of footsteps approached the door. Melissa is awake. She really is as punctual as always. He smiled with a warmth influenced by Klein's memories. He felt as though Melissa really was his younger sister. Of course, I don't have a younger sister, he mused to himself. Unlike Benson and Klein, Melissa never attended the Sunday school classes offered by the Church of Evernight during her elementary education. When she reached schooling age, the Lowen Kingdom enacted the Basic Education Law, which established a primary and secondary education committee and dedicated funding for the programs increasing the kingdom's investment in education. In less than 3 years after co-opting numerous church schools, the kingdom established many public primary schools. They strictly maintained a secular curriculum, distancing themselves from any conflict between the churches of the Lord of Storms, the Evernight Goddess, and God of Steam and Machinery. Compared to Sunday school, which cost 1 copper penny a week, a public primary school's tuition of 3 pence a week seemed rather expensive. However, the former provided education only on Sundays, whereas the latter held classes 6 days a week. As a result, the price was so low that it was almost free. Melissa was different from most girls. From a young age, she had enjoyed things like gears, springs, and bearings. Her ambition was to be a steam mechanic. Benson, having suffered from his own lack of education and understanding its importance, supported his sister's dreams just as he had supported Klein's university education. After all, Tingen Technical School only counted as secondary education. There was no need for her to attend grammar school or a public middle school as a prerequisite. In July last year, 15-year-old Melissa passed her entrance examinations and fulfilled her dream of studying at Tingen Technical School's Steam and Machinery department. Accordingly, her weekly tuition had increased to 9 pence. Meanwhile, Benson's company, affected by the political situation on the southern continent, experienced a drastic drop in both profit and business. More than a third of the employees had been laid off. In order to keep his job and maintain their livelihood, Benson had no choice but to accept more arduous tasks, frequently working overtime or going on business trips to places with harsh climates. That was where he had spent the past few days. Of course, Klein had wanted to share his elder brother's burden, but as a commoner who had attended only an average grammar school, he felt a strong sense of inadequacy once he entered university. For example, as the origin of all languages on the northern continent, The ancient language of Fasak was something that all children of nobles and the wealthy learned from a young age. Meanwhile, his first contact with it was in university. He faced many similar concerns throughout his schooling. Klein had devoted himself to his studies, often staying up late into the night and waking up early to keep up with his peers, and eventually graduated with average performance. Memories of his older brother and younger sister flashed through Xiaomingroy's mind until he heard the doorknob turn, and the door began to creak open. Only then did he jolt awake and remember that he held a revolver in his hand. This is technically a regulated item, and something that's guaranteed to scare children. Plus, there's still a wound on my head. With Melissa arriving at any moment, Xiaomingroy kept a hand on his temple and hurriedly pulled open the desk drawer. He threw the revolver into it before slamming it shut. What's going on? Melissa glanced over curiously when she heard the commotion. She was in the prime of her youth. Even though a lack of nutrition made her face thin and pale, her skin was glowing, excluding the spirit of a youthful girl. When Xiaomingroy saw his sister's brown eyes on him, he forced himself to remain composed as he picked something up before calmly closing the drawer to hide the revolver. His other hand on his temple confirmed that the wound had already healed. What he had taken from the drawer was a silver pocket watch embellished with a vine leaf motif. He gently pressed the dial at the top, flipping its cover open. It was the most valuable item left behind by their late father, a sergeant in the Imperial Army. But as it had been purchased secondhand, the timepiece often malfunctioned in recent years, even though they had taken it to a watchmaker for repairs. After its poor reliability repeatedly embarrassed Benson, who enjoyed carrying it to elevate his status, it was finally cast aside at home. It was worth mentioning that Melissa did have something of a talent for machinery. After figuring out how the timepiece's mechanisms worked, she borrowed tools from her technical school and started to fiddle with the pocket watch. Recently, she even claimed to have fixed it. Xiaomingroy looked at the watch's open cover and saw the second hand wasn't moving. Instinctively, he twisted the top dial to wind it up. However, despite turning it several times, he didn't hear the sound of springs tightening. The second hand remained motionless. Looks like it's broken again. He glanced at his sister, trying to find something to say. Melissa shot him an impassive glance and briskly walked over to take the pocket watch. She pulled on the dial at the top of the watch. With a few simple turns, the tick-tock of the second hand started up. But isn't pulling the button up usually just done to adjust the time? Xiaomingroy's expression froze. At that moment, a bell in a distant cathedral chimed 6 times, sounding far away and ethereal. Melissa tilted her head as she listened, then pulled up the dial once again. Now she twisted it to synchronize the time. All better, she said simply before pressing the top dial down and handing the watch back to Xiaomingroy. He returned an awkward yet polite smile. Melissa gave her brother a long look before turning to walk to the cabinet, where she picked up her toiletries before leaving for the communal bathroom. Why did her expression seem to contain a look of disparagement and resignation? Is it a look of love and concern for her dunce of a brother? Xiaomingroy lowered his head and chuckled. He snapped the pocket watch shut before opening it again. Repeating this movement, his thoughts wandered until one question struck him. Without a silencer, Klein's suicide, presumed suicide, should have made quite the noise. Yet Melissa, who was just a wall away, hadn't noticed it at all. Was she sleeping too deeply, or was Klein's suicide shrouded in mystery from the start? The pocket watch opened. The pocket watch closed. Melissa returned from washing up to see her brother's idle act of repeatedly opening and closing the watch. Her gaze once again filled with exasperation as she said in a sweet voice, "Klein, take out all the bread we have left. Remember to buy a fresh loaf today. And meat and peas too. Your interview's coming up. I'll make you lamb and peas stew." As she spoke, she moved the stove from the corner. She started a fire with some leftover charcoal and placed a pot of water on it. Before the water boiled, she opened the lowest drawer of the cabinet and carefully took out a can of low-grade tea leaves as if it were a treasure. She tossed about 10 leaves into a pot and treated it like the genuine article. Then she poured 2 large cups for each of them and shared 2 hunks of rye bread with Shomingroy over tea. Though the bread was free of sawdust and had minimal gluten additives, the taste wasn't particularly good. However, Shomingroy was positively famished in his weakened state. He kept his complaint to himself as he forced the bread down his throat with the help of the tea. Melissa finished eating a few minutes later. Brushing her waist-length black hair back, she turned towards Shomingroy and said, "Remember to buy more bread. We only need 8 pounds. It's getting warmer now, so it'll spoil if we buy too much. Lamb and peas, too. Don't forget." Repeating herself to drive the point home was a special provision for her bookish older brother, who apparently lacked common sense. Shomingroy smiled and nodded. "All right." And as for what 1 pound meant in the kingdom of Loan, Shomingroy compared the memory stored in Klein's body with his own and concluded that it was close to 1 caddy, a unit he was more familiar with, equal to half a kilogram. With that, Melissa got up and started to collect her things. Before heading out, she packed the last loaf of rye as her lunch, put on the old, shabby cap that belonged to their late mother, and grabbed the briefcase she'd sewn herself to carry her books and writing supplies. It wasn't a Sunday, which meant she had a whole day of class ahead of her. The walk from their home to Tingen Technical School took about 50 minutes, though horse-drawn coaches were available at 1/2 penny per mile, with a 4-pence cap within the city bounds and a 6-pence cap outside of them. Melissa always set off early and walked to school. As she opened the door, she paused and half turned to say, "Remember, Klein, don't buy too much lamb and peas. Benson might not be back until Sunday. Oh, and don't forget, only 8 pounds of bread." "Yes, all right," Shomingroy answered in resignation. At the same time, he repeated the word Sunday to himself a few times in his mind. On the northern continent, as in his own world, 1 year was split into 12 months for a total of 365 or 366 days per year. Likewise, 1 week contained 7 days. The former was a result of astronomy, which led Shomingroy to think that this must be a parallel universe. The latter had its roots in religion, owing to the 7 orthodox gods of the northern continent: the eternal blazing sun, Lord of storms, God of knowledge and wisdom, Evernight goddess, Earth Mother, God of combat, and God of steam and machinery. After seeing Melissa off, Shomingroy abruptly let out a breath of relief. His thoughts quickly shifted to the luck enhancement ritual. "Sorry, but I really do want to go home."